Hi, thank you so much. Tonight is our 10th episode, and it is my great honor to introduce a dear friend and a very special guest, Sister Armada. Sister Armada is one of the sisters of the Blessed Incarnate Word and Blessed Sacrament convents. We've said that a million times. I'm sorry I messed it up on live. That's
You're good to
how
go.
that works. And you are currently living at the Mother House here on One Lynn.
On Water Street.
On Water Street, yes,
Right.
thank you very much. So
That's where we first met.
that is where we first met
Yes,
several
yes.
months ago,
Yes.
and it has been just an absolute honor ever since. You have an amazing story to tell. We've told it here at the Victoria Art League, where we shared a couple of months ago the art from inside of the convents, both the Nazareth Academy and the Mother House convents, art that had been housed within the convent walls for over 100 years.
Right.
So, and this is how we first sort of got together and started talking about what we're going to visit about tonight, which is a 150-year journey starting in France. So you've got 30 minutes to tell me the whole entire story. You ready to start? Now, she's the archivist and the secretary for the sisters. How long have you been a sister?
How long?
Yes.
Last year I celebrated 60 years of being a professed sister.
60 years?
Yes.
Oh my goodness,
I
that's
know.
awesome. Well, happy anniversary.
You know, and when I looked at all of that, I said it was 30 of those years was out on ministry, out with teaching little ones, principalship, working at Archdiocesan School Office in San Antonio. It was just, I mean, all of those. It was fantastic out there, though.
Well, one of the
And
things
then
that I love most about
30
you
years.
is always the cheerful heart. And so I'm hoping tonight somehow, some way we're going to make you giggle. Because you do have the best giggle of any sister I have ever met. Not yet? All right. Well, we might have some jokes later. We're going to try this. So you taught for several years. How old were you? And can you tell me maybe the story of when you felt that you were going to be called into a life like sisters have?
Growing up at home, it was living with mom and dad, and mom had two cousins that were Sisters of Divine Providence in San Antonio, and my dad had a cousin who was a Sister of Charity of the Incarnate Word in Houston, and it was like I got to know both of these orders, and then there in Edna, where I grew up, the sisters from Victoria would come and teach us on Saturdays, and then I ended up. Actually, it was our priest, who was the pastor there at the time, really praying for vocations. And he began within the parish to have adoration, to pray for vocations. And vocations began to develop. And Sister Teresa Marie Miller, who just died a few weeks ago, was the first one. And then my cousin also entered there, and I was the third one to enter. But it was my journey with actually my grandmother had a deep influence on me, though. And it was like, in her family, it was like none of her 13 children, entered the religious life or became priests and all. And it's like she was praying that one of her grandchildren might.
Really?
And it was like, and I didn't know that to that extent, but she would tell me so many stories, and she wanted to make sure that I went with her when she would go to San Antonio for her two nieces, who were becoming sisters then. So I really got to know a lot about religious life in that way then.
Is your family from Texas? Are they?
Here, right. Mom and dad. Mom was born in Kurth. You know where Kurth, Texas is?
I have no idea.
Come on. It's just right down the road. Okay, going towards Hallettsville. And then my dad was born in Cameron, Texas, on the way to Waco from here.
And where were you raised?
I was born in Locke, Texas, which is just on the other side of Cameron, and then I was raised primarily in Edna. So that's just right down the road.
So at what age do you make, or at what age were you when you made your profession?
Actually, at that time, I was going to school, and it was when I was in the 5th grade is when I really felt the call.
Really?
5th grade, right. And it was just like, I remember I told my mom, I said, Mom and Dad both, and like, God is calling me. It was just like, And Mom says, look, there's no way. You're the only daughter I have, and I can't let you go. I said, Mom, anyway, I said, okay, Jesus, if you really want me to be your spouse, you really want me to belong totally to you, you're going to have to send me a little sister. Well, he sent me the most beautiful little baby girl I had ever seen. She was precious. It was like, okay, that can't be the reason anymore now, you know. So I really felt called. And then he sent me another little brother. So I've got 3 brothers and 1 sister. And actually at that time, we could enter the convent when we were very young. So I was able to enter right after the 8th grade.
Right after the 8th grade.
Right. In fact, do you know where Nazareth Academy is here?
Yes, ma'am.
In Victoria, just right. That we're celebrating that this year too. That academy, that building there, was built in 1951 because they were running out of space over there at the old convent. That building was built.
And the old convent is the mother house.
The old convent was the mother house at that time, right?
Yeah.
And it was also the school because it was just all over, classrooms and all over. But when the other building was built, that was the year I entered the convent. And so we were the first group to go all the way, all 4 years, and graduate from Nazareth Academy, the new Nazareth Academy. So, and I graduated from Nazareth Academy, and then right after that, the year when I was a senior in high school, I became what's called a postulant.
Okay.
And that was for 9 months. Right after that, after graduating from Nazareth, I entered into what we call the novitiate. And at that time, we received the habit and a white veil. And for 1 year, it was like totally spending that time in contemplative prayer and learning who we were called to be as Incarnate Word and Blessed Sacrament sisters, living in community, praying together, bonding together, eating together. Everything was together. And then 1 year later, that was in 1956, I made my first profession. So if you look at 1956 and 2016, that gives me the 60 years in.
That's awesome.
Isn't it though?
Yeah, that's amazing.
I've been so blessed. I've been so blessed. I have been, yes.
Ever a time when you were a child, when you were a young girl and making profession that you thought maybe not to do it?
You want to hear that story too?
I'd love to hear that story.
I'll never forget it. It was the old convent, the old convent, which was one of the first ones built in 1872. That old convent, it's been torn down way back when, but that's where we were at that time. And there was one room down on the first floor that was what we called the altar bread room. Do you know what altar breads are?
I do.
Okay. You know, and we made altar breads, you know, for the different parishes around them. Well, it was my turn to make altar breads, and I was in the altar bread room making the altar breads, and you make them in the Hall of Memories over there in the archives. I've got all of those things that we used, so I tell that story there then. But making the altar breads, making the wafers, you know, and then cutting them. And I'll never forget that day that I was doing that, you know, making altar breads and all.
How old were you?
Okay, that was 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. 19 years old.
So you're 19.
I was a teenager yet.
You're making altar breads.
I was making altar breads, right. And as I was making them, it was like I was remembering there were many young girls entering the convent, and there were many that were leaving. And even some had made profession already, but not final profession. Because at that time, you made first profession, and then you could leave at the end of each year after that over a 3 to 5 year period.
You know, I want to stop and talk about that for a minute,
Okay.
because that was one of the things that I thought was such an interesting conversation and knowledge that I had gained in meeting with you all. Was I was always under the impression that you would make a profession, that you would come into the convent, and then that was it.
No.
That you chose once, and you better make the right choice. Not that you couldn't ever leave, but that you wouldn't have some options. And you're saying that even then, and maybe now, you have a few
Yes.
opportunities to really make sure that this is what you
Right.
want to do. I
It's
think that's amazing.
It's a time of discernment, to discern, is this where God is calling me? Is this the place? Has God given me what He wants me to have for this vocation? Or is He calling me to some other vocation? But it's like, I mean, there are many that enter, and then in time it's like, I don't think this is where God is calling me. And they're free to leave. So it's that part. But you were asking me that question about,
Did you ever
Right.
doubt?
And
And you're
that-
making
and
altar
that-
breads at 19.
I was making those altar breads there, and it was like, I was thinking, okay, dear God, are you asking me to leave too? Was that? And I'll never forget, it's almost like a voice inside of me said, Amata, will you also go away? And I remember tears just started coming then, because He said, you are my beloved. And I said, Jesus, where would I go? Where would I go? You're the one. I know you're the one. And what was really striking me too is when I made my, when I became a novice, our names are changed. So I did not get the name Amata when I first, when I was born.
Can I ask you what your real name is, or your birth name?
My dad named me, and he named me Jeanette Christine. And when he named me Jeanette, it was like, for me, just to understand what Jeanette means, it's like little John, okay, and then Christine. Well, when I was going to have my name changed, I said, Dad, I need to let you know something. I said, Dad, my name is going to be changed. Oh, he just looked at me. He said, look, just don't get a man's name. Don't get a man's name. So when I got the name Amata, he said, my God, what kind of a name is that? I said, I never saw that before. Okay. And then...
so where does the name, so when you say you got the name Amata, is that someone gave you, bestowed within the convent that name?
Each of us at that time, when we were about to become novices, that's the first stage over there.
The first stage is a novice.
Our names are changed, and it is the Superior General, who I think she has in communication with others around too, what name will be given to each of those novices then. And the name that I was given was Amata. And later I found out that the Superior General of the Divine Providence Sisters, her name was Amata.
Oh, that's
But I
lovely.
wanted to know, what does Amata mean? And when I found out, oh my God, it was like Amata. In fact, I'll tell you about this too then. On here we have, it's our emblem, and on it there is, this is the emblem that we wear.
Yes.
And it's a crown of thorns that we're to wear on our emblem here then. And then IHS, which means, it's Greek, it means Jesus. And there is a heart here. And within the heart it says Amor Meus, my love. And there are 3 nails here. Okay, the nails that Jesus received. And there was one day at prayer that Mother Jean de Mattel, she heard those words, that He wants to rest on our hearts. And this is, he described what it was, His head resting on our hearts. The Amor here means love, so it's Amor Meus. Amata means beloved. And when I hear anyone that has the name of Amy or Amanda, I said, do you know what that means? It means you're called beloved. And for me to be called beloved, of Jesus, that was, because even later when I told Dad, Dad, I could go back to my baptismal name, but I want to tell you something first. I said, Dad, your name was Albert John, and John was the beloved disciple. And Jeanette means little John, that means beloved, and Amata means beloved. And I was really thinking about, I think I'd like to keep this name. He said, you keep it. You keep a sister. But my dad was a real inspiration for me, though, all throughout my journey.
And your
I was right
mother,
there.
did she eventually?
Mom, oh yes, she was supporting me every which way then too then. And even with my mom, there were so many memories. For her, it was family that was so important, so important. And what happened is, as she was growing up, my mom was she was the middle child of 13. And she was one that, I mean, it's almost like she was keeping the family together. And she was named after her mother. And it was like right there in the middle. So it's like holding them all together.
Right.
Mom had so many pictures that she took when she was growing up. And when we could go home, I could go home initially because of the cloister. I want to tell you about that after a while, though. Because of the cloister, we were still like transitioning from that period of time. And so we could go home only every 5 years. And we could spend 1 week. Well, each time that I would go home, that 1 week, Mom would pull out all those pictures and we would start putting these albums together. I mean, we've got albums. It was actually, I've got 24 albums
Now,
of the
Sister,
family history.
do you think that maybe that had an influence on later how you would become the historian or and the archivist?
Right now, it's taking pictures. It's telling stories through the pictures. I mean, it's like it's, and God has a message in those pictures.
So
throughout, yes.
tell me the story of 150 years ago.
Okay.
At the very beginning of this order, and about Sister Mattel, Gina Mattel.
Gina Mattel? I'm going to start with her.
Okay.
With Mother Gina Mattel, because we say that she's our foundress.
She's the foundress.
She's the one that began the Sisters of the Incarnate Word and Blessed Sacrament. And we go back, actually she was born in Rouen, France, back in 1596. And we were celebrating her, the anniversary of her birth in 1996. And so got together, some of us got together. Sister Stephanie was one that got together with us there then too. And we put together this newspaper. And we were celebrating Gina Mattel and celebrating her 400th birthday, actually.
Her 400th.
1596 to 1996. And in the back over here, there's actually a timeline all over here then as to how, where we were going throughout all those years. And it's described down here then too. So that was helping us to get the word out, who we are. There's our emblem there too, you see that. But there's all kinds of stories in here about that.
And this newspaper is available at the Mother House.
Right. Would you like some more here?
I would love some
I'm
here.
going to
And
bring a whole stack of them here
There's
because
several here at the Victoria Art League as well.
they go back to 1996. The papers, but the stories are, I mean, there was one man, he saw one over there at Incarnate Word Convent. He said, "Can I have one of those?" He said, "The one I got in 1996, it fell apart." I was like, I said, "Yes, you can take even more than one of them then." But this tells the story, her story there then. Even more so than, actually, Mother Gina Mattel founded the order there actually began in Rouen, France in 1625, and then moved to Lyon, France. And she was able to open 4 convents. And we called them monasteries at that time because we were cloistered.
Well, that was one of my questions. So can I ask you then, what is the difference between a monastery and a convent?
With the monastery, some still call them monasteries, but in those days, a monastery was such that you totally gave yourself to God, and through the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, you lived within that monastery. You did not leave the monastery. It was a place of prayer, contemplative prayer. There was different apostolates that you would do, but you could not leave the monastery there. Gina Mattel found that one of the greatest needs at that time in history was to teach. And so she said, okay, we're teaching, but we could not leave the monastery. They could not leave the monastery there then. And so students would come, children would come. They would come there to the monastery, and they would teach them there. And it was still, the cloister was still intact all the way until actually much later on. Okay, she founded the 4 monasteries there, and then the order began to grow more so. And then after Jean's death, the last one was in Paris. Lots of stories about Mother Gina Mattel, but I don't have time to share all that with you now, but some of it's in this other book too then. But during the French Revolution, all of those monasteries were suppressed. And some of the sisters in Avignon actually gave their lives at that time.
I was going to say, some sisters died.
They did, right. Lots of stories, and I have another book that's going to help to tell that story too. You've got one here too, I think, in this one. But this one tells that story. This is, I mean, it's one that several of us, I think about 6 of us, got together and put this book together to tell the story. We even have a family tree in here that tells that story all the way from the beginning until today. But with her, with the 4 monasteries there, all suppressed, and then it wasn't renewed, it wasn't refounded or restored until exactly 200 years ago last year.
Wow.
So 200 years ago last year, we celebrated the restoration of the order in France, and also the founding of the order in Victoria in 150 years.
Right.
I said we would not be where we are if it had not been founded there then. So it was like, maybe 50 years after the foundation that the Victoria Monastery was open.
Wow.
And we were cloistered at that time because the cloister had not been lifted, when the sisters first came here. And the cloister was not lifted until around 1919 because Rome, they were seeing that there were so many sisters that were, and many times they called them nuns too if they were into the cloister.
And there's no difference?
Not now.
Between a sister and, a nun?
A nun, sometimes they call, if it's a nun living in a monastery and it's cloistered, and theirs is primarily a ministry of prayer, contemplative prayer, staying behind, and some make altar breads, but they were doing different ministries, behind the cloister walls. But ours, it wasn't lifted actually until 1939. The cloister was lifted. So then we could leave and we could go out more often, whatever that could.
But up until that point, you were still teaching, and students were still coming into
like over
the
there,
convents and gaining instruction then, and then the 30s.
Like 1939, when it was lifted. Well, okay, let me go back to that part there. That we could not, like the next one. Okay, I'll go to Victoria.
Okay, all right.
I'll go to Texas.
Coming
from France.
Okay.
Coming from France, then the first sisters, the first bishop of Texas actually goes there to France, and I
love this part of the story.
He is, and he's actually from France, from Lyon, and he goes there.
So the first bishop of Texas is actually French. Okay.
And he goes to Lyon, and he goes to Mother Angelique, who is the superior there in Lyon. And he says, Mother Angelique, really we need sisters there in Texas. It's just so much going on, and priests, sisters, but we need sisters. And could you help us to get some sisters to go? And she said, look, we don't have that many sisters right now, Bishop, and there's no way we can send sisters to Texas too. And he said, okay. He said, but I want you to pray over it because I'm going to go to Rome. I need to go see the Holy Father. And so you pray over it, and I'll come back and check with you then. Oh, Bishop, she said, you're going to go see the Holy Father? Look, could you ask him for a special blessing for indulgence for our new chapel that we just had? Will you ask him for that? And Bishop said, yes, I'll ask the Holy Father. And so when he went to Rome and he talked with the Holy Father, and he asked the Holy Father, told him what he really wanted. And the Holy Father said, look, and he told him what he was asking of Mother Angelique. He said, you tell Mother Angelique if she wants a special blessing, she is going to have to send sisters to Texas.
I love that because it's such a deal.
Oh my God! When I tell that story to children too, they just
struck a deal.
They burst out.
We will.
I
yes.
know. And so when he comes back, and he tells that to Mother Angelique, she knows, this is what God wants down.
She's about to send some sisters to Texas. Yes.
And so if you look at the family tree over there, they've opened a monastery in Belmont, which is not too far from Leon, and one of the young sisters there had the missionary spirit within her, and that was Mother St. Clair Valentine. And so when she was hearing this, it was stirring within her, but she didn't really want to speak out because there were others and older than her, whatever. But finally, Mother Angelique was asking some of the other sisters there, what they thought.
Who would like to go?
And they said, you know what, the one who is so full of this is Sister St. Clair Valentine. And so when they began talking with her about it, it was burning inside of her. She said yes. And so the bishop was saying, okay, and they found three others. But of those four, Mother St. Clair was the youngest. She was barely 24 years old.
Wow.
But she was the one, there was something in her. It was so strong within her that God was giving her that call, that she was, God was speaking in so many ways there then. And our charism, our mission, is to make the Incarnate Word known throughout the world. And in that book, you're going to read different things about what different ones have said about her. Even when she came here to Victoria, the city of roses, because Mother Gina Mattel said, sometime along in history, the order will be brought to different parts of the world, but didn't know how, when, or where. And that's when it happened, through Mother St. Clair Valentine. She came first, though. She brought those first three sisters. Four of them came to Brownsville. So they're in Brownsville, and she is the superior there in Brownsville. And then that goes on for several years. Here comes the second bishop of Texas. That's Bishop Dubuis. And Bishop Dubuis, he's talking with Father Gardet, who's over here at St. Mary's Church. And if we could just get sisters here in Victoria. We need, with the war, it's just so much going on. And if they could get sisters. Well, Bishop Dubuis said, and you know what? I am from France, and I know the Sisters of the Incarnate Word and Blessed Sacrament in France. He said, I know them, and I know Mother St. Clair Valentine in Brownsville. So he goes to her, and she says, we don't have enough sisters to send there. So she says that she would go back to France, and Father Gardet went back to France too. And Father Gardet wanted sisters not only for teaching, but for nursing. And so he found most of them were cloistered. And when he asked Mother Angelique, she said, our sisters cannot go outside the cloister. They could not go into hospitals. And some, even they were looking at orphanages too, a deep need at that time. And so finally, Bishop Dubuis, he said, okay, Mother Angelique, I know some that are interested, in this mission. And so he brought them to Mother Angelique, and they became Sisters of Charity of the Incarnate Word. And they're the ones that are in San Antonio and Incarnate at the University of Incarnate Word.
Oh, of Incarnate Word.
Yes. So that we call them our cousins. So they came over also through Bishop Dubuis. So Sisters of Charity of the Incarnate Word. And he also found two Divine Providence sisters that were ready to come over. And they were not cloistered as we were at that time, could go out. And they could go out teaching. We couldn't. And then there was another little sister. She was a novice at the time there in Leon. And she wanted to go to Texas. So Bishop Dubuis says, okay, can she come with us too then? So here's this one, Sister Regis. So she comes on board that ship then also.
A Mexican worship? No, the first one was the Mexican worship.
Okay, when Mother St. Clair went over there, she found, she was able to get, was it 4 Irish sisters, and the others were French sisters. and there were, 10 of them, I think.
Right.
Was it
But they
10?
didn't, not all of them made the journey.
No, on the way over, they were on a Mexican warship. On the way over, 4 of them got yellow fever and died.
Mm.
And that was very traumatic, for Mother St. Clair to, all
Right.
of that. It's just, that was very, very hard.
No, because she was not only, she was the leader then, right? At 24, and
Well,
not
these
necessarily
were
the
years
oldest.
later now.
Right,
Probably, I don't know how many years later, because that was in 53, they came to Brownsville, and they came to Victoria in 1866. So you've got some years in between there.
Right.
Right. But anyway, when she finally gets, finds her way back to Brownsville, they discern, can they really send sisters to Victoria? Because they don't have that many, and here the 4 of them that they thought going to be helping had died, and it was very, very difficult. I even found in the archives letters that Father Gaudet was writing to Mother St. Clair, when are you coming? It's just like, they couldn't wait for the sisters to come, So it wasn't until 1866, well actually, they had left France, I think in January, and then in August they began discerning about sisters to come to Victoria, and it wasn't until December 21st that Mother St. Clair came with 4 other sisters. And then here's a Sister Regis that had come over with the others, and she was living here. I think, who was the mayor of Victoria at that time? 1860. Is it De Leon?
Oh, I have no idea.
I think. But anyway, she was living with them, with that family.
Oh, she lived with the mayor and the family.
Just right down the road from the convent.
Well, think about, I remember part of this story
Okay,
too,
go on.
where when they got here and you had a small school, you only had how many days before you built a school?
Father Gaudet gave them his
house.
His house, which was the old post office that had been moved there on that lot. And actually that lot had belonged to De Leon, and he had given it to the church.
Oh, wow.
So there's so much of the history of Victoria that's tied into all of this, though.
But how many days after they got here did you all open the very first school? Because I thought that was really amazing. I mean, wasn't it?
Okay,
It was like under.
Yeah, 21. Okay, 21. December the 21st, they arrived. They opened the school. Was it January the 6th or 7th, around in there then? 7th.
Yeah.
January the 7th. And there's all kind of stories to tell about that then too. We actually found pictures, to show that first building where they were living, and then that first school, and then later they built another story on that.
I have a question, because I heard this, and I don't know if this is true or not, but Bridge Street, is it true? I heard that at one point in time there was actually a bridge instead of the street between the convent and Nazareth Academy.
You know what? It was like, when I heard that was Bridge Street, and I learned the history of Brownsville, that made a connection for me, because in Brownsville, they were living in this convent here, and they had built a school, but the school was across the street. Well, they could not cross the street to go to the school because they were cloistered.
Because they were cloistered.
So what they did is they built, it was like a bridge, they called it a bridge, all from the 2nd floor up here, across the street to where the school was. So the sisters would walk across that up there to go down. And
my gosh.
When I said that, the sister, I said, Carmelita, I am understanding that correct. She said yes, and she said, you know what else? She said that section across the street, she said it got to be where they didn't have enough room in all those classrooms over here, so they had some classrooms up there too then, across over there.
Well, how cool that the convent here is separated by Bridge Street. I think that's neat.
That hit me really hard. Then I said, bridge, oh my gosh, and they made a bridge, that was their bridge from one because of the cloister. But
So-
we weren't cloistered at the time that this building was built here. It had been lifted.
For your profession, what did you teach?
School?
School?
First
I mean, I
grade.
know school, but first grade?
First grade.
Oh,
I
that's
went
awesome.
to St. Leo's. That was the first 2 years. Taught first grade at St. Leo's there in San Antonio. And then the next year, actually, Our Lady of Victory School had just been built. And I think it was open for 1 year. And so I was sent to Our Lady of Victory School. And I taught first grade there for 4 years. And then I went to East Bernard, taught first grade for 1 year. Came back to Nazareth, to Our Lady of Victory for 4 more years. So it was like and you were assigned, you didn't know where you were going until the assignments came out each year.
What drew you to this particular order? Because there are several order. Now I understand that the Incarnate Word and Blessed Sacrament is all over the world. There are convents and ministry in Africa, in
all over Mexico, Texas, in Cleveland, Ohio. We have sisters there. Then, actually, they're even, especially from Mexico, they are traveling. They're all over. Even in Spain, Venezuela. They're different areas, just all over. So they're sisters of the Incarnate Word and Blessed Sacrament. And it's like we're called to make the Incarnate Word known, to make Jesus known. And it's mainly by our presence that people see us. And like Pope Francis says, that they see your joy, in your presence, that you're joyful. So whatever ministry we're in, but primarily at the beginning it was teaching, and it was hospital work or nursing.
And how many sisters at the Mother House now?
How many are we now? I know just the Victoria community, we've dwindled in size. Right now we're 60.
60.
And we're 40 something, I guess, at the Mother House right now. Incarnate Word Convent is what we call the Mother House.
The Incarnate Word Convent is the Mother House.
Right, it's the Mother House now, right.
I just like Mother House. I don't know why, I just feel like it's
our Mother House.
It's so comforting. And the Hall of Memories is there. That's one of my favorite places in Victoria to visit.
I love that place.
Do you need to call to make an appointment to visit the Hall of Memories?
And I'll be more than happy to show you around there.
So let me ask you this while we're wrapping up. What would you say to a young girl who now is considering a life like the one that you've lived, where you're dedicated solely to and married to Christ?
I would invite her, if there is something going on within her right now, and it's like, okay, Jesus, where do you want me? Where are you calling me? What is it that there's something going on inside? It's like it's burning inside. I would invite her to get to know different religious communities. First one, come to see us. Okay, come see us. Come spend the weekend with us. Come live with us. Get to know us, and we can share so much of who we are. We have women that do that. And they come. We have what we call come and see weekends.
A come and see weekend.
Come and see weekend. And they'll come spend the weekend with us.
So happy.
And they'll bring. And we'll play games together. They'll pray with us. We'll tell stories. But it's just getting to know us, though. Who we are, and know our charism, know our spirituality, and we've got all kinds of things around there to show them. I put together now what we call the Gina Mattel room, because Mother Gina Mattel, she was a mystic, and for me, it's like get to know her through her writings. There are her autobiographies, her journals, the letters that she wrote and others wrote to her. All of that we have available now then, just to get to know her. And one of my favorites, though, and I was on sabbatical the year that book was translated. They were all in French at the time. But when that book was translated, it was the treatises. And one of the treatises that Mother Gina Mattel wrote about was, she said, we're called, he wants to build, the Incarnate Word wants to build a spiritual temple inside of us. I should have brought one of those here to show you. But the spiritual temple, and that spiritual temple that we're to have built within inside of us, it's to be, the foundation is faith. The floor is humility. The walls around is hope. The roof is charity. And there are pillars. And you know how many pillars there are around? 8 of them. And those are the 8 Beatitudes. And when she describes about those 8 Beatitudes, it is, I mean, just to examine, okay, Lord, I tell you what, that third pillar is kind of weak right now within me, you know. The floor really needs to be get attention, you know. It's like hope, you know. We say that we have a future full of hope. You know, this wall needs to, I need to, you know, be more energized there, full of hope for what He has in store for us now then. But that spiritual temple is really speaking. We have that whole image in the Gina Mattel room, you know, where you can see it visually then too.
Come and see.
But then come see it within me too.
That's lovely.
Each of us,
And Mass, do you have a special Mass that we can attend with just sisters, or do sisters have Mass? Is there ever a time that we can just come and have Mass with the
sure
sisters?
You can. Right. We have Mass usually in our chapel there.
At the Mother House, at the Incarnate Word Convent.
Incarnate Word Convent, right. We have Mass there every morning, except Mondays we don't. We have communion service because our chaplain is out on Mondays. But during the week, we have Mass there. It's usually around 6:20. That's early. But if you're going to come, you need to let us know because our doors are still locked at that time.
6:20 in the morning?
In the morning.
Oh.
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
that's very early, sister.
But there's some that they'll knock on the door. But if you want to come
have like a late evening
if
Mass?
you'd like to come on Saturday morning, Saturday morning at 8:30.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, Sunday morning at 8:30. Okay, so you're invited. Okay, you're invited on Saturday morning or Sunday morning at 8:30.
Wonderful.
Okay, now if the doors are locked, just knock on the door.
Oh,
and
my
we'll open it
goodness.
for you then. But if we know you're coming, we'll open the door. It will be unlocked for you then. Okay, so just let us know.
All right. Well, I will come on Saturday.
Okay, and you can come
at 8:30.
Come for Mass this Saturday at 8:30 and.
All right. I promised my friend I would ask you because we had an argument about this. Do sisters still make the host? Are you still making the wafers?
Our sisters at Incarnate Word Convent, we no longer make them.
But do sisters still make them?
Yes.
Okay, so
In
that's
fact,
a tradition that's
right,
never changed.
In fact, there was a cloistered Carmelite cloistered. They lived in New Caney, and I remember, and we would order our altar breads from them. And I used to. That one time, I even went to visit them because I wanted to see what it was like there. You know, so they're behind the grill, like we used to be, but they're behind the grill, and I talked with them. You know, just behind the grill like that. But we ordered them from them. Now those sisters now have moved to San Antonio with another group. They're Carmelite sisters there. You
But
know,
sisters are still making.
But they're the ones that are making all those altar breads now.
I think that's
in our area.
awesome.
It is.
That's a tradition that you think will ever change?
Right.
Never change, you think?
You mean
the tradition of sisters, yes, making the altar bread.
Especially the cloistered ones. I think they would continue that.
That's wonderful. Now, one other question is Golden Jubilee.
Oh, golden.
How long are you a sister before you celebrate a Golden Jubilee?
Professed for 50 years.
Professed for 50 years? So you've had a Golden Jubilee?
I did.
Oh, you did?
I had 25, I had 50, and I had 60.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so what's the next one? Is there another one?
I don't know if I'm going to make it to the next one.
Sister!
It's 70.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Of course.
Thank you for inviting me, though.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay,
well, I hope that you'll come back again.
Okay.
And on your 70th, on your 70th, it's still a Golden Jubilee, or is it like platinum?
I don't know what you call 70s now.
Well, we'll see.
Diamond?
We'll see. Diamond?
Diamond?
That's awesome.
There's 70 and there's also the 75, so I don't know about that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you all so much for watching.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, of course, anytime. So I was ready for you to giggle, but we're coming back to that.
I'll try to do this. Okay. We'll finish it with a giggle then.
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you with all of my heart.